Are you familiar with your saboteur? Do you believe you're worthy of love? Have you ever sabotaged an exciting opportunity or a relationship? Do you get in the way of your own success? This is Soul Mechanics, practical tune-ups to be a healthy human, and I'm your host, Kate Foley. Some time ago, I met someone I wasn't expecting. For purposes of anonymity, I'll call him X. For our first date, we met on the street, walked around a small, quaint town lit up with Christmas lights, and then we had dinner. The conversation flowed from the moment we met. Within minutes of meeting, I felt like I'd found a long-lost friend. We shared intimacies of our lives. We bounced from funny stories to stories of anguish and hardship. But it was all organic. It was effortless. He listened to me. He responded to me. I felt respected as a woman, but especially as a person. I felt like he saw me. When he hugged me at the end of the night, I felt safe, and I didn't want to let him go. Before leaving, he wanted to make plans to see each other again. This was a kind, consistent, intelligent, interesting, and genuine person. I don't typically meet someone like this in the dating world, nor do I come across someone like this in daily life. And since then, I've learned that this person is a most unique and admirable man. While driving home after our first date, I cried. I almost pulled my car over to the side of the road because I couldn't gather myself. I had no idea what was happening to me. I think I cried because of the way I felt in his company, and then when I left his company. It was so overwhelming. I'd never felt so accepted by someone I'd just met, and there weren't any obvious expectations. The interaction felt so authentic and easy. I cried a couple of times after our first meeting. Each time, I felt an upwelling in my chest. I felt like my rib cage was being ripped open. I felt exposed and vulnerable. I'm a self-sufficient person. I've lived a good part of my adult life thinking I don't need help. I can take care of myself. And to be emotionally reliant or attached to someone is dangerous for someone like me. And all of that was about to change. I was in new territory. Then we had our second date. He invited me over to his house, and I drove over there, no questions asked, like a trusting fool. There have been so many times since then that I've thought, he could have been an axe murderer. What was I thinking? I could have been a maniac too. What was he thinking? But he trusted me. I trusted him. We trusted each other without actually knowing each other. Our second date was shocking to both of us. We laid on his couch facing each other, holding each other, and gazing into each other's eyes for hours. The evening was innocent and eternal. We could not unlock our embrace. I could feel his heart pounding through his chest. At several points during the evening, we both had episodes where we needed to stand up and walk away to breathe. Again, I felt like my chest was being ripped open. My heart was pounding. My heart pounded and raced for 2 weeks straight after meeting him. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. But my heart spoke the loudest. And when I exposed my bleeding, open heart to him, he took it carefully with both hands and held it tenderly. The way he touched my mere shoulder was just as delicate and powerful. It was one of those evenings that laid a foundation for years to come. I wrote a poem to him following our second date. I sent him my journal entries written about him. Many were very poetic and revealing. I've never written poetry to a man before in my life, and I have never allowed anyone to read my journals until X. As the weeks passed, the relationship deepened. We would come to know some of each other's idiosyncrasies. We would come to know each other's aspirations and frustrations. We would learn more about how we respond to challenges and illness. We talked for hours on the phone. At some point, We logged the hours we spent on the phone over the course of 2 months. It was 59 hours. Eventually, I started to pine for him. I always wanted to see him beyond practical reasoning. We both had very busy schedules, and we live at a distance that's just beyond convenient. But that didn't stop me from telling him that I did not want to commit to someone who I couldn't see more than once per week. I knew it didn't make any sense when I said it, but I said it nonetheless. He responded quietly and firmly, "Kate, it just isn't practical to see each other more than once per week. Our schedules don't align, and we haven't even been dating that long." I wanted to break things off with him. That was my solution to wanting to see him more. Tell me this makes any sense. We took a trip together for a break from the cold winter weather and from our schedules. We had a great time. It was relaxing, but it was too short. I can't travel with too many people. In the past, I've traveled with people who need my attention the entire time, or they need control over every detail of the itinerary, or they lose their tempers, or fill in the emotional immaturity blank. During this trip, I realized I could travel with him. He was responsible, calm, commanding, confident, and kind all at once. He was easy and organic. He allowed me to be me, while I think he was himself. On this trip, I recognized how much I love his laugh. We had a couple of nights lying in bed and talking that we laughed so hard I started crying. He laughs with his whole body, and it's so genuine. He doesn't laugh if he doesn't think something isn't funny. If he's angry, he makes me aware. If he's feeling silly, a joke or a prank is on the way. If he hears a song he likes, he dances. So I can always trust his reactions and his emotional state. There's no guessing with him. About a week after we arrived home from our trip, he invited me to an art exhibit by one of his oldest and dearest friends. At this event, a bunch of his oldest friends were going to attend, and I had never met most of these people. Earlier in the week, I came down with what I thought was a sinus infection. Each day seemed to be better, but I lost a lot of sleep. I suffer from insomnia anyway, so I really hadn't slept all week. The evening of the art exhibit rolled around, and I thought I was 90% better, so I gave it a go. His friends were absolutely lovely. He was lively and attentive. I had a great time. Then we drove back to his house. On the way, I began to cough and gasp for air. I couldn't breathe. Suddenly, I realized I was in the presence of an old, familiar acquaintance: asthma. I was severely asthmatic as a child. Hospital admissions were a common occurrence. The asthma is something that hits my emotional core. It has brought me to my knees and forced me to face the reality of impermanence on countless occasions throughout my life. Asthma has also forced me to confront very damaging familial relationships. I was so weary of this chronic condition that oppressed me for so many years. 7 years ago, I made a decision that I was no longer willing to accept this condition as a part of my life. I walked away from uncompromising relationships that defined me as dependent, weak, and unworthy of respect. I began studying herbalism, and long story short, I thought I'd healed it. I hadn't had a single symptom for 6 years, so naturally, why would I carry an inhaler? Well, I was kicking myself for not having it on hand. I was scared. I was angry that this very old wound was open again. And I was curious as to why this was happening at this moment. As I was panicking, he responded to me calmly, rationally, and with a touch that felt nurturing and assuring. I just kept saying to him, I need to calm myself. I need to stop panicking. He said, "You're going to be okay. We're going to get you home. We're going to get you some tea, and you can rest." When we arrived at his house, he made me some chamomile tea, and I breathed in the heavenly scented steam from the cup. It did calm me, but I was still struggling. He stayed close, but gave me space while I leaned over the counter collecting myself. I felt safe, worthy, and respected in his presence. Suddenly, 2 of his friends arrived, as planned. We were all going to hang out for a while, but I really wasn't feeling right. I could feel the tenuousness and unpredictable nature of my lungs kicking in. When the first couple arrived, I told one of his friends that I'd just had an asthma attack. She immediately said, "Oh, I have an inhaler. Do you want to use it?" The first phrase that appeared in my mind was, "Saving grace." I gladly accepted it, and I will forever remember her kindness and generosity. I took it and felt immediate relief. We all talked for a bit, but then my body began to sink, so I retired to bed. As soon as the night was put to rest, I began to cough. I couldn't lie horizontally. Every time I tried to rest, the cough became a relentless and agitated counterpart. Finally, I gave in. I crawled out of the covers and placed my hand on him and said, "I have to go home. I can't breathe. Something has changed and I cannot continue to stay here and cough all night." He wanted me to stay, and he didn't like the idea of me leaving in the dark. But I persisted, and I wouldn't agree to waiting. I was in trouble. So I drove home. I called my brother, who's a physician, and I explained what was happening. He sent in a prescription to the pharmacy for antibiotics and an inhaler. X called me later in the morning. I told him I was okay, but I was having some trouble breathing. I told him I was waiting for the antibiotics. What I didn't tell him was that I was in trouble. He said, "Okay, I'll call you later to check on you." That's not what I wanted to hear. I felt disappointed that he couldn't hear the panic in my voice. He was supposed to hear me. He was supposed to read the signs. He was supposed to come and comfort me, but he didn't. And I didn't ask him. The antibiotics could not be filled fast enough. I took my first dose around 11 a.m., and the rest of the day is a blur. I had waves of coughing spells that very nearly incapacitated me. I vomited twice because the coughing was so intense. I was taking my inhaler every 2 hours on the hour. Each time felt less effective and less relieving. There was one moment when I was sitting on my couch leaning forward, gasping for air, and I thought, this might be it. I can't catch my breath. I can't breathe. I started crying, which made things much worse. The idea of calling an ambulance sent me into a shame spiral because of such strong associations with my very dysfunctional childhood. So I stopped and succumbed to the possibility that this illness might take me. But it didn't. However, something happened to me emotionally that day. I felt completely alone. I felt rejected and abandoned. It reminded me of the statements that were told to me and the eventual belief system I would adopt as a child. You don't matter. You're worthless. You're a loser. No one loves you. You will always be alone. You deserve to be alone. So naturally, I thought this new person in my life must be an imposter. One disappointment, one unintentional mistake from him led me back to my comfortable and alluring childhood pain. I called him that evening, even though a conversation would have been impossible without a severe coughing fit. He texted me back saying, "Can I call you back? I'm out to dinner. Hope you're feeling better." I didn't respond. I felt another stab in my chest, another disappointment, and that old familiar voice surfaced from the sulfuric cavern of my past. He's just another disappointment. You're not worthy of anything better than anguish. I felt my chest collapse. I felt my gut clench. I resigned myself to my bedroom and closed my tear-filled eyes while propped at 90 degrees. I didn't sleep for several days. One morning, I launched out of bed at 4 a.m. because I couldn't pretend to sleep anymore. I wrote in my journal about all of my suspicions, all of my old relationship wounds, all of my paranoias, all of my delusions, all of this in a nice, elaborate narrative directed at him. My solution was to end this relationship. After all, he was just like the rest. I'd been fooled by this man. He didn't know me. He couldn't read me. He didn't want to know me. He didn't help me. So what did I do? I sent him my journal entry. This journal entry was damning and unfair and full of illusion, but I sent it. Ironically, a couple of hours after sending him my journal entry, I spoke with my therapist. I speak with her once per month to keep my head straight, as many practitioners do. After all, everyone needs an objective witness to their lives. Mine is my therapist. I explained the situation to her. In my sleepless, infected mind, I thought my narrative was spot on. She began to laugh with her hand over her mouth. She said, "Kate, I think you're making some crazy here." I said, "I am?" She said, "Yeah, I don't see any red flags here for him. If there are any red flags, they're yours." I sat listening and stunned, because on a level just beneath the surface, I knew she was right. She said, "I think we have a sabotage situation going on here. Kate, you were raised to believe that you don't matter. You are accustomed to avoiding asking for what you want and need, because it's always been dangerous. Sometimes you don't even know what you want or need. So here comes this man who treats you with kindness and respect. You don't know what to do with that, and you certainly don't know how to tell him that you need him. He makes you feel vulnerable, which makes you panic. What do? You do what you know. You push him away. Is that what you really want, Kate?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, this relationship might be over, so we should probably start learning from this one for the next one." She was being sarcastic, so we laughed. My laugh was more painful and remorseful, but we had to laugh at the absurdity of my actions. My actions were dumbfoundingly absurd, and certainly lacking awareness. My saboteur crawled out from under the dark, recessed emotional cavern and whispered a new, convoluted narrative in my ear, convincing me that I would be safer alone, that this person was going to deceive and hurt me like everyone else. The saboteur is seductive and convincing. The lie seems so concretely true. This story is an example of how we can sabotage ourselves. I was sidetracked by my wounds and my narrative rather than acknowledging my feelings. Had I focused on my emotions rather than my narrative, I would have been directed inward to confront my saboteur and to acquaint myself with her. But instead, I tied my shoelaces together and ran. Then, I blamed someone else when I fell flat on my face. This man removed ancient barriers I'd so carefully erected around my heart. He exposed all of my insecurities, fears, deep pain, hidden desires, and ultimately, my historical perception of love. Why would anyone want to sabotage a kind, loving, respectful relationship. Because if you're not aware of your deep wounded belief systems, regarding love in this case, you will put into motion only what you believe. My beliefs were that I'm not worthy of kindness, consistency, and respect in an intimate relationship. Intimacy in my history has no boundaries. It's capricious and demanding and painful. I am now aware of these deep patterns regarding vulnerability, and I have a lot of work to do. I understand that I push people away when they get too close. I need to ask for what I want and need. I need to trust. I cannot expect others to read me or to do what I'm expecting simply because I fear disappointment. Disappointment is sure to happen if I don't ask for what I need. Now that I'm acutely aware of this pattern, do you think I'm going to change it? Do you think that my perceptions of intimacy have altered their course? Do you think that my relationships from now on will be completely different? No. I would like to think that I'm on a linear trajectory upward, more conscious, and always aware, but that's not how this works. I'm one of those people who learns best from her mistakes. I will learn from this mistake. I am now acquainted with my saboteur. But life is not about perfection, and I am sure to stumble again. Our lives are rich with pain, confusion, irritation, frustration, excitement, frivolity, laughter, you name it, ups and downs. It's the challenges that push us toward consciousness and evolution. Without it, life is mediocre. What is most important here is to embrace the lesson, be kind to myself, understand that we all have unacknowledged pain that requires healing. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I have to laugh at myself. I have to laugh at my foolishness, at my folly. But in the future, I will take my saboteur very seriously. This is Kate Foley. Thank you for listening.